yeah, you haven't showed us, firstly in the scope of those failures, we never told you that it's a perfect system, but you need to show us that private military contractors can necessarily go and fill in those gaps, Madam Speaker. Because given their characterization of private military contractors, they themselves are war veterans, so their skills are exactly the same. We don't think that either man can come and save the world and fill those gaps. So really that point makes no sense. Now sit down. Let's then look at the second idea, Madam Speaker, because clearly on the first level they haven't shown us how these private military contractors are likely to commit concretely and ensure that peace is established, right? We tell you furthermore, on a second level, there's a greater harm of the dilution of the role of developing nations in the United Nations. Because we tell you at the end of the day, that clearly the way the United Nations works is that in the status quo, the developed nations are contributing a lot to the international organization through money, Madam Speaker, to their fund. No, please sit down. But we tell you the way in which developing nations show their contribution, and one of their main avenues to do so is to contribute their troops, Madam Speaker, to peacekeeping forces. We give you examples of India, we give you examples of Pakistan, Madam Speaker. We tell you in fact that countries are very keen to join it. When you look at the mutiny that took place in Bangladesh, one of the reasons that actually for that was actually because these peacekeepers, the troops felt that they weren't, exactly, they felt that they weren't able to contribute to international peacekeeping forces. We think that this is one of the avenues that developing countries want to explore, Madam Speaker, because there's a great sense of pride, and there's a great sense of achievement, and there's a great sense of contribution in having done so, Madam Speaker. We tell you when you go ahead and dilute their role by taking private military contractors, you're diluting the sense of contribution amongst developing nations. You're making them feel that they're not meaningful within the United Nations, that they can't really do anything to essentially have a greater say with the United Nations, Madam Speaker. And this leads to a further sense of disillusionment amongst developing nations within the United Nations of how much respect they're given within the United Nations, how much responsibility they're given within the United Nations. We think that's particularly harmful, Madam Speaker, to the working of the United Nations as well. Please sit down. We say furthermore, we think that these soldiers also feel that the contribution is being cheapened because other soldiers are simply doing this for money, Madam Speaker, and getting the same level of pride because they also apparently saved lives, whereas these people are purely doing it for national pride, Madam Speaker, and because they want to fight for a flag and save lives purely for a humanitarian reason, Madam Speaker. We think on that level, it cheapens the idea. But let's look at the last idea, Madam Speaker, which is that of shirking of responsibilities by developed nations. Because as they themselves said, that the US and UK essentially don't want to send more troops, Madam Speaker, and they essentially are short of funds. We tell you what that means is that they're essentially shirking responsibility, because when you look at the way in which the United Nations operates, very often the major decisions in terms of which countries should the peacekeeping troops be sent to and what strategies should be taken are made by countries with greater clout, which is the developed nations in this case. But what they're doing now is that they're not taking the responsibility for that. They're shirking that sort of responsibility, leaving that and delegating that to private military contractors, Madam Speaker. That's particularly harmful. But moreover, their policy also leads to scapegoating of these private military contractors, because in joint missions between private military contractors and national armies, they're more likely to try and point the fingers at them rather than themselves, Madam Speaker, as they themselves showed, Madam Speaker, because they don't want to clearly show national armies as being the one who torture the citizens on the ground. We think that's also particularly harmful. We're very extreme. Madam Speaker, for all these reasons, we're extremely proud to oppose.
The leader of opposition will close the opening house and invite the closing house to start with a member of government.
I'm not capable of rhetoric, and which is exactly what the closing government will do today. Remove this romantic filter with which we have viewed the whole issue and talk about pragmatics. What is the UN? It's a massive bureaucratic setup, and what is it good at? We're going to look at the fact that the UN has a historic track record of being very successful in public-private partnerships, where it's effective paymasters to companies that provide services. We want to look at peacekeeping as a security service that saves lives. Not much different from people who provide food in places under the aegis of the World Food Program. People who save the lives of children under the aegis of the UNICEF. People who protect heritage sites under the World Heritage Fund. All of these are UN bureaucratic organizations where a paymaster says, you do this job for us, you do it well, you have a bonus in it for you. If you don't do it well, the next guy will take over. And the UN does that very, very well because there's a massive oversupply of European bureaucrats with nothing else to do who will take care of these things. These bureaucrats, unfortunately, not so good at getting things done by other countries' armies. That's going to be the extension from the closing government. We're going to prove to you why the UN has to focus on what it's good at, and here we are saving lives. And if you really want to look at it with a romantic filter, let's get pragmatic and say, let's save lives the way this organization can do best. Let's go into some rebuttal. He talked about matter of national pride. The first thing that's most like a soldier wants to do is to defend his country. When he's not in his country, when he's 5,000 kilometers away in another country, he doesn't think he's doing his job as well, or he's doing as important a role as he originally signed up for. The amount of pride that a guy has in saving people in Congo is much less than if it is his own nation, his own citizens. Because this is a guy who said, I am happy to kill a citizen of another country to save my person. So suddenly he finds himself without a rationale for finding himself in the middle of a third man's conflict. National armies aren't very keen on doing somebody else's dirty work. Secondly, we also have to look at the idea that these people really have their pride mostly tied to the idea that they showed up. They don't really care about how well they did. They're like, these are the people that did their work. And today, there is nobody else to compare their performance with. They all turn up, and they all know it's shit job. No one really has to show that they have done a good job at what they are doing, because it's not like some other countries go and show them off by saying, we did a better job of peacekeeping than your guys. That's not going to happen. They're all going to turn up. And like it happened in Rwanda, they're going to stand a safe distance away and protect, say, expats and diplomats. That's what these countries do. Their pride is tied in showing up. Peacekeeping is today a story of, we tried, we did a good thing, we all got together and agreed to turn up, and that's what these countries are repeatedly doing. Now let's make it something a little bit more effective. How many lives are we saving and who's responsible for that? And let's get some money into that particular act. Actually, world peace is a kind of an expense account. We have to spend some money on it. And I think it's a happy thing for us. We are willing to pay. And as you pointed out, the United States is happy to pay. Sit down. Now let's see the two reasons. He asked why are things not working today and why they're going to work better tomorrow. The first thing is, let's analyze the two reasons why things aren't very good today. First one is quality. He pointed out the fact that US and UK aren't getting involved in the business anymore. It's Nigeria, Bangladesh, India and Nepal, because those guys are saying, what, our governments aren't paying us very well. The stipend that comes from the United Nations peacekeeping force is a bit more, and I also get some expat allowances. I just saw a bunch of army majors who had whitewater rafting in Kenya after their holiday in Congo peacekeeping. So these guys, and the other problem with the quality is not only that they come from, say, third-rate countries, they're also the third-rate soldiers. Because a country is not going to take its elite forces and send them away from the country. You get the quality of a garage sale. You get the not doing any work. They haven't had any experience in field. Let's send them to Congo, where anyway they're not going to get into high-intensity conflict because they don't want to get involved in it. So that's a good place to put these new kids in. That's what's going to happen. The second reason, as I pointed out, is motivation's poor. Everyone's proud to do good work. And a security contractor from a private company will also be proud to show pictures to his kids and say, these are the kids that I saved, these are the villages that I protected, these are the food convoys that I saved. Everyone's proud to do good work. But his bonus is also on top of it tied to the fact that what gifts he's going to get his kids for Christmas is going to be tied to the fact that he did a good job in Africa. And that's going to only happen in the case of a private military contractor setup, instead of a national army who don't really work on bonus systems tied to KPIs, which is something the United Nations can do when it comes to hiring private companies. This is where I'll get into. So before that, I'll take it quickly, but before that, my next point will be the idea of why the UN is good at doing this kind of work.
So prove to us these troops will remain committed given the sort of risk reward